Hello and welcome back. This is the low budget frame jig series, video number 4. In the last video, we fabricated the head tube fixture. Link up in the corner to that one. In this video, we are moving on to the bottom bracket fixture. Let's get started. And more cutting of 3/4 inch plywood and 1/2 inch plywood. I wonder if any of you guys can tell me what the standard metric thickness, what that is for plywood outside of the US. If you know, please leave a comment. I would like the plans for this build to accommodate metric standards for build materials outside of the US, so that'll be very helpful. And while I'm at it, if you also happen to know the 1/2 inch equivalent for threaded rod, that would be great too. Thanks, guys. Alright, I've got all my pieces cut. I need to drill holes in the same location on all of these blocks. So I'm marking one corner of each block so that I can orient them all at the same rotation. Here I'm attaching some cutoffs to my fixture plate. I'll use these to index the blocks to be drilled. And templates. You guys know the drill. Sticky stuff, sticking the thing to the thing. Setting up and drilling for the first hole. Now for this part, you'll want to heighten your awareness for each step. Slap yourself in the face a few times if you have to. That always works for me. Make sure the arrows of the block line up with the wood jig arrow. And make sure to cut all the pieces before moving to the next location. It's super important to cut all the pieces. The reason for that is when it's time to move the wooden jig for the next hole, you will lose your last position forever. So take your time and don't rush. Alright, as I mentioned earlier, it is time to move the jig for the next hole. Assuming you are cutting on a standard drill press, the exact position of the last hole will be gone. So make sure you get all those pieces cut first before moving on to cutting the next hole. And more of the same for the rest of these holes. And now it's time to get these blocks glued together. I'm using threaded rods to clamp them. When done, you'll have a set of 3, 2 with double 3/4 inch, and a single with 1/2 inch sandwiched between 3/4 inch pieces. So I let that set up overnight, and from that time to the next day, I was thinking about it and realized I had done it wrong. So I cut another set of blocks and will do it right this time. What I should have done is also cut the steel pieces at the time when I cut the wooden blocks using the same jig and indexing. And yeah, I could have fudged it and made it work, but for the sake of this video, I wanted to show you guys the right way to do this. So here we go. To cut the steel pieces along the wood blocks, with the wood blocks, I'll need a double index jig. That is because I have a pair of parts that need to be in the correct orientation for drilling, which are different from the other parts. It'll make a little more sense as you see this video. And so I need a different pin location to index those. Okay, here are all the parts drilled. Next up, we need to cut the last hole on the bottom bracket holder plates. I'll double these up and index them together with screws. This part is important. You want to cut both holes at the same time to ensure that the hole location is the same, like exactly the same on both parts. Well, maybe not quite exactly, but really close. Alright, let's drill the final holes on the jig clamping plates. Same deal here, fasten them together and drill both plates at the same time. Next up is the spring fastener and hook wingding things. Okay, if you look closely, you can see that when I clamped the part, the clamp slid my template and offset it by a few millimeters. So that part was toast. From there, I just clamped the parts with the vise instead. And here I'm cutting hooks on the bandsaw and marking cuts for the bottom bracket plates. I made those cuts off camera, and here are the final parts. Alright, here we go again. It's time to glue these parts together. I marked circles on the side that was up at the, the side facing up at the time of drilling. I'm screwing the 4 plates together to make sure I've marked the correct side of each plate. If you have one of the plates flipped, you will notice a fair amount of resistance when trying to insert the fastener. That's because none of these holes are drilled perfectly. They're just kind of there's gonna be some inconsistencies when you're drilling and using your jig to kind of put the parts in place. So you're gonna want to make sure these are all facing the right side up that you drilled them at when you're putting the pieces together. All the parts are ready, including the threaded rods. Showing you guys one last time, all the parts need to face the same direction for gluing, so make sure to get that right. And here I'm being a little more conservative with the glue this time. I wanted to avoid getting glue on the threaded rods because the last time it was kind of hard to get the rods out. I got glue everywhere. So I'm just getting a little dab of glue in the center of each of these pieces to keep things nice and neat. And really, they just need to kind of they need to hold together. But for the most part, they have these threaded rods holding everything together. So. And I almost assembled the middle part incorrectly. Luckily, I caught myself and corrected it. You can see I had a lot of trouble getting the rods through each part. I couldn't just slide them through. There was a lot of tension because the holes are drilled very close to the same size as the rods. So once you have that many holes, kind of you're trying to get this rod through all the parts, there's gonna be quite a bit of resistance. Yeah, so I kind of wish I had, used the drill to kind of ream the holes with the drill bit a little more before I had gotten to this step. But I got it to work, so. But next time, I will try to, loosen up those holes a little more. Alright, I'm not trying to be edgy here with the lighting. The power went out in the neighborhood, so I was left to finish the job with this little LED emergency light. And I had to finish because glue waits for no one. Day 3. I think I lost track. The next day. Anyway, the next day, and the glue is set. I disassembled this thing, and while it's apart, I reamed the holes to loosen them up a tiny bit. I wanted just enough place so that I can tap the rods back in without too much resistance. And this is pretty important because you don't want to be wrenching down on both sides of this thing with nuts, tightening it just to get it all to like slide together. You want the pieces to like nicely on their own slide together, and then the nuts will just kind of be like holding everything together without too much tension. If you do it the other way, you're probably gonna like there'll be sections that are really tight and some that are not, and that just doesn't sound right to me, especially for this type of fixture. And now for a dry run, and I found a problem. Tensioning the clamping nut tight, it at the bottom there, when I tension that thing in there and tighten it, the fixture wiggles a bit. And this is a situation where you don't want to tighten it like too much because it's plywood and it's flexible, and you don't want to mess up your jig, the main frame of the jig. There should be a little pressure there, but not too much. So when I applied the right amount of pressure, it still is pretty wiggly. That is for sure not a good thing. So what I need to do here is I'm going to need to redesign the clamping section of this thing. I've already got some ideas in mind, and I will likely show that to you guys in the next video. But for this one, the show must go on. Yeah, let's move on. Here I am setting up springs for the fastener hooks. They didn't quite have enough tension as I would have liked, so I'll need to get springs of thicker gauge at some point. Alright, here we are at the last step, or near the last step. I'm attaching the bottom bracket center bolt thing. And almost done. Just one last finishing touch. A 3D printed knob. Yep, I could have bought one, but I wanted it to look just like the concept, and the artsy fartsy guy in me had to print it. Sorry. But yeah, I mean, you know, you guys can buy one. Or maybe I'll like have these knobs in the kit or something if I sell it. But these knobs are pretty easy to come by, and they generally run you, I mean, the reason I wanted to print it is these knobs, they tend to cost between $10 and like $5, which in my opinion is kind of a lot of money. But yeah, you can find knobs of various types and sizes, so you don't have to get a 3D printer just to get one of these knobs on your jig. Okay, let's tally up our costs. These costs reflect all the expenses in this build to date. We have plywood, glue, polyurethane, $96. All fastening hardware, $46. Spray adhesive, $10. A36 steel, $66. Coil springs, $5. And fastener knobs, assuming you are buying them, $10 each. Our total is $233. Okay guys, that is a wrap. I will need to redesign the clamping plate to prevent that wiggle you saw. That'll be in the next video, along with the start of the dropout fixture. Thank you guys for watching, and see you in the next one. Peace!